What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Dream Chasers Ground Zero. Today we have with us Bo DePaoli. Bo, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do? And to follow that up, would you please tell us the story of your personal ground zero moment and some of the things that you learned along the way to help you get to where you are today?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to chat with you. Yeah, so I'm from the Chicago area. I'm actually, I'm in like Northwest Indiana, but I'm about 45 minutes from the city of Chicago, right by Lake Michigan. From there, I own a couple of gyms and also a real estate syndication company, and just trying to take the world over one day at a time. And yeah, my ground zero moment, that's a really good question. I've had so many, it's hard to pinpoint just one, I mean, you go along this journey, and every year there's, a couple of moments in your life you're like, man, that could have been done different, or I should have done it this way, or maybe I'll go this route, always changing up. So it's hard to pinpoint just one.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to tell everybody that comes on here that I consider ground zero constant phenomena, to the point that literally almost every day you could pinpoint something that just pattern disrupt, where like just something throws a wrench in your plan and you're just like, well, now what?
Yeah.
So like really it depends how much you really want to break that down. But yeah, I mean, it's a very open concept, and you could think, the longer you sit there and think about it, you're just going to keep thinking of more and more different instances
Yeah.
that you could essentially relate to the same thing.
I think one thing that really probably sticks with me the most is, I bought my gyms about 8 years ago, and I'm very much an analytical person. And a lot of times I live in the spreadsheets, which is not always good because life never plays out the way the spreadsheet may seem. So I think that was probably one moment in my life where I figured, okay, it doesn't matter what I have on paper, what my plan is. It's never going to go the way that you plan it. Never. And, one, Tony Robbins always says, and I think this quote is very true, is life is a lot like a plane route. Most people think, if you're taking off from LA to Chicago, that it's a straight line, right? But it's not. That plane makes a lot of corrections on the way there, even when it's on autopilot. If there's a little gust of wind that shifts it off course, it's got to auto correct. And that's very much how life is, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of us can really relate to that, just in the sense that we can all pretty much recall something that, we really just planned it all out. We were like, this is exactly how it's going to go all the way from A to Z. And we're going to follow this plan to a T, and it's going to be great. And we're all going to come out on the other side happy, and everything is just going to be, wonderful. And then
Yeah.
you might have got to step two and then just got backhanded by God knows what. And your
Yeah.
plan got completely derailed. And then you're just basically distraught because you had this whole vision for the way everything was going to go. And
Yeah.
it went not at all according to the way you wanted it to go. So
Yeah, totally.
I think that's absolutely a good example of like just something that you can think of. There's always going to be twists and turns, and you
Yeah.
truly never know. You can try to plan and accommodate for those things as much as you want, but there's always going to be something. And
Yeah.
I mean, I stick to that to this day, just that like every time I try to plan something out, I just try to leave little gaps in there because something
Hmm.
is going to go wrong. And it may not look like it, but I know something is missing. I mean, and
That's right.
that's just from the number of times that I've done it. I just know that I'm always going to forget something, or I'm not
Yep.
accommodating for something. So something's always going to go wrong. Um,
Yeah, when I bought my gyms, that was I think that was one of the hardest lessons to learn in that scenario, because again, I underwrote the deal, and I was thinking, oh man, this will be great. I'll be living on an island in 5 years, and not the case at all, because what ended up happening was I was buying two existing gyms, and um when I was doing my due diligence, well, it wasn't even really due diligence. When I was doing my underwriting on the deal, um, they had sent me reports on on revenue and profit and loss that was not accurate at all. And so when I closed on the gyms and I actually got in there and, you know, like we had already exchanged monies, right? Like I now am the owner. And when I got in there and I started looking at all the billings and stuff like that and realized that it was a fraction of what they originally reported to me, man, I was like, what am I going to do now? You know, because here I am thinking I'm going to, you know, our revenue is going to be X and here's my expenses and, you know, I'll be enough to cover the debt, blah, 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 until I can get this thing turned around. And then come to find out that it was not the case at all. Like the revenue that we were actually only going to receive was about only 10% of what they reported to me. So I had to cash in my IRA just to keep the business going. It was crazy, man. So yeah, it's just, that for me was like day one. Well, actually it was like week one of owning the business. I found out that I didn't buy what I thought I was buying. And my attorney even said when we were putting the purchase agreement together, he said, you know, you should have a due diligence clause in here. And I'm like, no, I know the guy. Like, you know, he's gonna do me right. No, always have a due diligence clause in your purchase agreement. Learn that very quick.
Yeah, I think that's just another prime example of like one little thing can throw off, and it threw off all of your projections. I mean, going years out, like it threw
Right.
off everything that you thought was currently surrounding that. And then obviously that turned into, you know, a much bigger hassle than you originally planned. Like you said, you had to cash in your IRA and everything. Like that's a pretty big deal to then, you know, keep that afloat. And obviously, you know, like it was what you had to do in the, you know, the new purchase that you just made. But it was just like I said, just another example of something like how, like, you know, one little thing that you kind of like give a little lenience to that, like, yeah, I don't think it's that important right this second. And then all of a sudden there's that wrench in your plan.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yeah.
what would you say to somebody that is kind of going through a similar situation right now? Say that they're looking to start a new venture, say that they're, you know, just looking to start going down a new path, whatever that thing may be. And that first roadblock just happened. Whatever that thing may be. What would you say to them in this current situation as to, you know, how to tackle this obstacle?
I would say y- um, probably the biggest thing would be just to put your head down and keep moving forward one step at a time, even if it's baby steps. Don't get emotional. You know, a lot of people, you know, they'll get all ticked off or whatever, and they'll feel sorry for themselves, and that's okay. But don't don't let it, like, live in that one moment briefly and then move on. Because if you sit there and wallow in your own self-pity, then you're not going to be able to progress, because there's always a way out of everything. Always. Even if you don't have the resources, you can still figure out a way to get through those bad times, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a video a little while back that I've talked about on here a couple of times. It was Hal Elrod was the guy in the video. I believe he was on someone else's show in the video, but it was just a short clip of him, and he was talking about something he calls the 5 minute rule. And he says, like, when something goes wrong in your life and whatever that thing may be, you can have 5 minutes that you can scream, kick, punch, do whatever you need to do, get all of it out,
Yep.
and then tell yourself 3 words, can't change it, and then move on, and then
Right.
shift your focus to the next thing. And I mean, like that was something that was even going through my head just this morning. With I had a couple different things that went wrong that I kind of had to like decompress for a minute. That, you know, I'm like going through those few minutes where I'm like, you know, angry, frustrated, whatever you want to call it, and then I'm like, all right, but now it's gone. There's
Right.
nothing I can do about it now. Like it's in the past, the time is gone, whatever it was happened. Now I have to shift focus. Okay, what can I do now, given that that has already happened? Because obviously you cannot go back and change it, just as we said. And I think like that's a really good example of that. Um, and there was one other thing I wanted to add there, but I kind of lost my train of thought when I thought about that, because I thought that was also really important to mention. But anyway, we'll just keep rolling with it. But in like these different ventures, I know you said you started out in the gyms, and then obviously you kind of had a little bit of a hard lesson there with the due diligence clause, like you mentioned, and now you've made the shift into starting a real estate syndication company. with these kind of different ventures, while they are somewhat aligned, they're still a little bit different as well. What would you say your experience has been like in kind of like dipping your toes into different things now, where you've pursued kind of like they're both passions, but different passions? How have you kind of been able to manage that?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm managing it very, very well. Um, you know, I would say that there is a ton of similarities between the two businesses, right? You have your lead funnels, right? Your whether it's your deal flow, whether it's your investor flow, whether it's people interested in a gym membership, it's all the same lead funnel, right? It's all the same process. So that's very similar amongst the businesses. Um, you're trying to keep your gym members happy by having a clean facility, having it updated, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with your investors, right? You're trying to communicate to your investors on a monthly or quarterly basis, and giving them exactly what you told them that you were going to give to them, just like my gym members, right? And even now, like my one facility, we're getting ready to do a renovation, and it's been a very, very long process because gyms during COVID, like the whole fitness industry got hit really hard from COVID, right? States were shutting gyms down. I mean, there was some states that up until just a month or two ago were allowing gyms to reopen. So banks don't really look at gyms very favorably right now, but beyond that, we're still trying to give our members a great product, and fortunately my members have been patient. They know that it's tough right now because of what COVID did to the industry. But I would say like it's interesting how similar it's all business, right? It's all business, it's sales, it's marketing, it's customer service, it's all the same, then there's slight differences. The products or services might be different, but ultimately it's all pretty much similar operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to kind of be able to find those like the I want to say common ground, but I feel like that's not the best word. Just like those common similarities between different things, and just being able to kind of like pick out some different things. It reminds me of a conversation I had not too far back with a guy on the show. His name was Matt Teifke. And we were talking about like different passions and different things that you've been interested in kind of like throughout your journey. And he was saying like, okay, so like that's what you did here. Okay, what did you like about that thing? Okay, well now you do this. Okay, well now is that same thing associated with that thing? Okay, yeah. So you've now realized like that you've done multiple things all with this one thing included, where like
Mm-hmm.
whatever that thing may be. And obviously at that point, I mean, at least I would hope that's something that you enjoy. Obviously, if it's not something you enjoy, you should probably get out of the things that you keep doing that involve that. And I mean, obviously there's some things that are a little bit unavoidable, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, in managing now multiple different businesses, I know you said you own a couple gyms and now the real estate syndication business. We talked about kind of finding the common similarities in those, but I'm sure that calls for a pretty busy day on certain occasions. What do you kind of use to help stay focused and stay motivated and continue growing those businesses?
Well, I've got a really good team that helps, right? And I'm a numbers nerd, so I'm always looking at metrics, KPIs, where are we at money wise, what's coming in, what's going out, why did we sell more apparel last month than we did this month, or whatever, right? Um, so I think that, I'm really big on reporting and getting a very what's the word, like focused KPI on certain parameters of the business, so you know where you need to adjust. So when I do go in and I see like a certain metric might be off a little bit or different than the prior year, I'll sit down with my team and I'll ask them, well, what do you think? What's happening? What should we do different? Maybe we should try this. Maybe we should do this. Um, so I think that team is a big thing, and I just use a basic like task list. Just I need to do this today. I need to do that. check it off as I go. And actually email too. Email's almost like another like sub task list for me, you know. But yeah, that's pretty much it, really.
Yeah, no, I think that I mean I've recently discovered as well as like heard from a few other people just how powerful checklists can be. Just kind of keeping yourself on track. I mean, and then like the more things you accomplish, like you can take compounding into effect and things like that as well, you know, where you get through the first three things, well now you're excited and you have energy to do the next three things.
Right.
And you can like there's something about that like physical I'm trying to think of the way to do it. Like when you complete something that you get to cross that off and say, you know what, I did that. And then at the end of the day,
Mhm.
you can look at all those things you did and you can feel like you accomplished something. What's the quote? I don't know who coined it originally, but the quote goes along the lines of like, you know, if you want to, you know, start your day more productively, start by making your bed. So that way,
Mm,
like if everything else goes wrong and you achieved like absolutely nothing else that day, you made your bed. You know what I
right.
mean? You did achieve something. And
Yeah.
now and you start that way. And obviously not every day is going to go like that, but it's just kind of similar in a way where like, you know, you start with something small, build a little bit of momentum, and then I look at all the different things that you can accomplish at the end of the day. And you can visibly see that. You can see I accomplished X amount of things today. And I think that
Yeah.
that can be truly powerful as well.
Yeah, totally. I totally can relate to that. You know, I will say that uh, up until I would say the last couple of years, I was very much working in the business rather than working on the business. And I think that that shift of mindset has been definitely much better to be able to operate the business. Because if you're constantly working in the business, you can never grow the business and take the business where you want it to. And I've had people tell me that all the time, like you need to be at the 30,000 foot view, not at the ground level. So delegate and elevate, you know, delegate and elevate. And I would say ever since uh, post COVID, when gyms were able to start opening back up, is when I really started to take that mindset because for two reasons. One is they're right. Like I can't be constantly at the front desk and telling the staff what to do because then that doesn't empower the staff to be able to make their own choices, right? And be able to run the business. Because if I want to grow to multiple like locations of gym locations, or if I want to scale the real estate side of the business, I only have so much bandwidth, right? So I've got to allow those people to manage, operate, make those mistakes, and coach them on where they should be directing the business, right? And even if they make the mistake, like I always tell my staff, like you're going to make a mistake. There's no question. I make mistakes daily, and I'm not going to hold that against you. The only time I'm going to hold that against you is if like I tell you to do something and you don't do it, that's a different story, right? Or if there's a certain expectation of the business and you're not abiding by it, then you know we're going to have a conversation. But for the most part, like you're going to make those mistakes, you know, and that's okay because now you'll know going down the road how to manage more effectively and be able to operate the business more profitably, right? And so I think that that shift post COVID um, has really helped me. And that right there, the other reason why is because that's when I started the real estate side of the business, you know, the syndication, because I knew at that moment, like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to give up something over here to be able to take this to a certain level, right? Because ultimately, even though I've operated, you know, several different businesses, uh, starting another business is no different than starting a new business, right? You're still going to have the same challenges, the same pitfalls, and the same pushback to getting the business off the ground. It doesn't matter that I've been in business for 10 plus years or whatever, it's still a new business and you're still going to have those challenges to overcome.
Yeah, no, I love that. What would your advice be to a young entrepreneur today that maybe just started a business or is maybe like hoping to start a business in the future to try to help them get through that conundrum that you just spoke of, where like, especially at the beginning, like obviously you don't necessarily have a bunch of money. I mean, in most cases. And you're really just trying to get to the point, you know, where you can at least prove your concept, get things off the ground,
Yep.
get a little bit of momentum going. You know, beyond that point though, what would you say to someone like so that they don't get stuck working in their business, so that they can move through that point effectively and get to that point where they can look above and manage and then either be able to focus on growth or focus on expansion or whatever that thing is for their business? What would you say to that person?
So I think that's a two-part question, right? I think one is it depends on how well capitalized you are in starting your business. Because if you're a huge fund, you can go out and you can hire those people to do those things that you want to do, right? You could be the visionary, right? Here's where I want to go. So you're going to hire an operations guy, you're going to hire a marketing person, right? But if you're not well capitalized and you got to wear several hats, well, you're going to be doing that for the first 3 to 5 years, or until you can become capitalized enough that you can push that down, those tasks downward, right? I had this conversation with this, I want to call him a kid. I mean, he kind of is, but he's not. He was like 19, right? And he was working with me on some deals that he was looking at in Texas. So he was underwriting these deals and he wanted me to take a look at this underwriting and me underwrite it. But anyways, like I was talking to him about the deal and at the time I didn't know how old he was. I knew he was young. And I said, "Hey man," I said, "how old are you?" And he's like, "I'm 19. I'm like, "Man, I love that." I go, "Dude, if there's anything I can tell you, just keep going. Just keep pushing forward." I go, "Don't give up." I said, "You're 19 now. If you can close a deal in the next 2 or 3 years with another GP, in 10 years time, there's no question in my mind that you're going to be a millionaire. There's no question, but you just got to keep going. You can't give up, especially at 19. Like right now, he's got everything against him, right? He's got his age. He's got his lack of experience. He's got, you know, more or less no credibility in the industry, but yet he's still going after it. I love that, man. I think I love seeing that amongst the youth, especially nowadays, because you don't hear of the youth really working hard towards a goal because everything is so accessible now with social media and technology. It's right at your fingertips, which is more of a reason why if you're going to go after something, if you're going to open a business, if you've got a goal, if you want to be the next Olympian, whatever it may be, there is no excuse why you can't achieve that, for as many resources are available at your fingertips right now. You know, I always tell kids in the gym, like, you know, they'll ask advice on how to do a specific lift or how should they program their workouts. And, you know, I'll tell them. And at the same time, I'm like, do you know how many YouTube channels there are out there of very credible people that will tell you how you should structure your workouts, how you should do your meal planning, you know, where your lift should be at? Or beyond YouTube, there's even apps now that are created by some very, very good people in the industry, whether it's bodybuilding or weightlifting or whatever, that you could achieve your goals if you just, you know, work with those people.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of us, young kids nowadays, with everything being so easily accessible, I feel like where we get caught up, and I've even found myself caught up, is just because everything is so easily accessible, there's so much information to the
Mhm.
point that you don't know what's good and what's bad. Because then, like, you also have like rival influencers in some cases where they're saying that this person's a fraud and this person's saying that they're a fraud. And you're like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm just here trying to figure out how to get, you know, a good lift in so I can actually, like, you know, look better in the mirror or whatever that
Yeah.
thing is. Like in the case of weightlifting. But like in other cases, like there's just so much information in your face. Like you don't really know where you're supposed to be
Yeah.
paying attention. Like I know for
Yeah.
me, this was a big thing when I first kind of got started because like I originally just got interested in like how to build wealth, and that brought like real estate up. So then I started looking into real estate, and obviously real estate is a really large industry, even larger so than I had any clue that it was when I first got plugged in. So then when I, you know, just started trying to do research on all these things, I mean, and there's just like
Yeah.
I don't even know what to call it, like
Gobs
just
of
information
information.
upon information upon like that. I mean, you could just get lost in. And I
Yeah.
quite literally did. So then it got to a point that I was like asking people around. I was like, dude, my head just hurts. None of this even makes sense anymore. What am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like in my personal experience, like in my journey, the best thing for me in that specific scenario was finding a mentor in that space. And
Hmm.
that's where, like, you are doing specifically for like these young guys at the gym, like you're mentoring them, you're telling them through your experience what you did well and what you didn't do well that they can then learn from. And really that's where a lot of this has come from, just because a lot of us don't necessarily have those people and some of us are afraid to go find them, but it's those people that have been where you want to go or already are where you want to go or have at least tried to go where you want to go and have some experience that they can then guide you to get where you
Yeah.
want to go.
Yeah.
And that's the power in these conversations and putting yourself out there in that respect, just because they can tell you what they learned, whether good or bad. And then you can learn from that without ever having to make that mistake. That's not to say there's no power in making those mistakes, as we were just talking about as well. But it's just saying that you could potentially avoid that amount of time and be doing better now rather than later. But
Yep.
bouncing back on that mistake piece, one thing I wanted to talk about when you were mentioning it is just the importance of making those mistakes.
Hmm.
Just like, and that's something that we talk about on here a lot. I mean, it's just that the mindset around failure is so skewed that people are so afraid to do something wrong that, I mean, we think everything has to be perfect, and that's just simply not true.
Right.
And I mean, this is something that I still struggle with, just breaking I'm trying to think of what to call it, that belief, we'll call
Stigma.
it. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. But just breaking that down and saying, like, that's not actually how this has to be. The fact that I'm even here trying, showing up is better than nothing.
Hmm.
And, like, even if I'm doing it wrong, if I show up and I do it wrong today, I'm not going to show up and do it wrong again tomorrow, or at least I hope not.
Hmm.
Like, you
Right.
should learn from that
Right.
and then reapply that. But that's the power in making those mistakes and in, like ground zero moments, like we talk about on here a lot. Like I tell people, like, it's those moments that really hurt the most, that, wherever you were in such a bad situation, you don't ever want to go back there. So you make some sort of personal vow or whatever it is, a promise to yourself, your family, whatever, that you're never going to be back where you just were. But that is what I'm talking about. That failure, that mistake, whatever that thing was so powerful that you're never going to do it again. But now
Hmm.
here's the thing. It hurts so much that you've changed your behavior, your mindset, your actions, all of this to never do that again. And it was one little failure, one little mistake. And I understand that, in a lot of cases that can feel monumental. But especially when you're young, like we are what I like to call and what I hear lots of people call billionaires of time.
Hmm.
Because especially where modern medicine is and everything now, like we're living, not all of us obviously, but there's a lot of people living longer than we ever have before.
Right.
Like we're not only living to our 50s, we're living into our 80s and 90s and some even beyond. Like we
Hmm.
have time. And I feel like a lot of us, get caught up in this thing, and me especially, that like we're in a hurry just to, achieve whatever vision it is, get to a certain point. But I have to tell myself all the time just to slow down,
Hmm.
like just to like take a breath and enjoy what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one thing that I feel like I struggle with, because like I am able to like celebrate small milestones, but like still to a certain point, I like struggle celebrating the little things along the way that help build that momentum. So like sometimes I just get kind of like overwhelmed because I neglect to acknowledge like what it is that I've just accomplished or what I did earlier that day or this week or whatever. So the point that I don't allow myself to enjoy the journey enough. I mean, and that's where I try to be fairly like very transparent, because like I'm still learning too, but
Hmm.
like I'm here,
Hmm.
I'm showing up, I'm here to learn. And yeah, obviously I know I'm still going to do things wrong, but I'm still learning. um, I had a guy on a little while back as well that he had a quote that I think he said, if I do something correctly, I learn 3 things. If I do something wrong, I learn 10 things.
Hmm. That's a
And
good quote.
I was like, wow. Like, and especially because that's something that you can kind of put into numbers. Like if you really want to do the math, the numbers are obviously, skewed one way or the other. And I obviously can't necessarily say that's 100% accurate, but it's powerful. Just
Hmm.
because, like I said, the power in making those mistakes and doing those things wrong is you won't do them again. Like if you do something wrong and you get it right,
Yep.
you're going to do that thing wrong, but you're building a bad habit, and eventually you're going to have to take all those steps back,
Right.
because like you've now built confidence doing something the wrong way.
Yep.
And I don't really know how to like describe it in the best way. I'm not, well versed enough in the science of all of it, but
No, you're
I can
right.
say I've learned, and yeah, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. You nailed it on the head. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, and that's the biggest learning that you're going to get is from those mistakes. Biggest education. And I tell kids all the time, especially nowadays. I'll tell my staff, they're like, well, they're going to college, whether it's they're going to a community college or maybe they're going to go away to college, and I'm like, for what? I'm like, what are you going to study? And they're like, oh, I'll just get a business degree or something like that. I'm like, you're wasting your money. This is just my opinion. I'm not saying that this is what everyone should do, but in my opinion, like college, unless you're going to be a nurse, an accountant, an attorney, a doctor, to get any kind of general degree, it's a waste of money. You're going to spend $100,000 on a degree that everyone else has got that doesn't set you apart from anybody else, right? I have gotten more of an education in the last 4 years of running and owning my own business than I did in the 4 to 5 years that I was in college. And I tell that to all the kids that work for me, because there's just no, in my opinion, there's no value there anymore for the money that's being spent. I mean, could you imagine taking that $100,000, say you're going to get into real estate, right? Because you can go and get a student loan, no problem, right? Say you were going to get into real estate and you wanted to start buying commercial properties. Well, like you said, you go out and you find yourself a mentor that's going to help you acquire some of those properties. Well, maybe you go in as an LP first into one of his deals. You take that $100,000 and you go and you become an LP and you say, hey, I'll work for you for minimum wage just to shadow you and understand how the business works, right? And so you go to work for him and you learn how the deal flow works, how to underwrite a deal, what you should be looking for in the deals, how to buy a deal, how to close a deal, how to manage a deal. You do that for 4 or 5 years, and that 100,000 that you originally invested, you're going to 2x your money by the time the 5 years is done. So you made another 100,000. So you turn your 100 into 200, and think of the education that you got during those 4 to 5 years of working for him. Who's to say that you don't even help him close more deals in that 4 to 5 years, and you get a little slice of the GP, even if it's 2, 3, 4, 5%, right? In that deal. And when he goes to turn that deal, recapitalize that deal in 3 to 5 years, like, where else are you going to get that? You're not going to get it in a classroom. You're not. That real life experience right there is everything. And it costs you nothing. You actually made money by doing it. So I kind of going back to what you said, like that young kid, that's exactly what I would do if I was 25 years younger, is go out, find that mentor, work for him for free, work for him for minimum wage, take your licks, your beatings in the beginning, because by the time you're 30 years old, you will be light years ahead of any other 30-year-old in your same group that went to college. You'll be a millionaire. You'll have financial freedom. You'll have the freedom of your time to do whatever you want. And you can, from that point, who's to say you can't start getting into other businesses, right? I mean, there's so much potential out there. I just feel like college, unless you're going for a specific degree, like I said earlier, like an accountant or attorney or a doctor or a nurse that requires those studies, to me, it's a waste of money.
No, 100%. I feel like this is something I just talked about recently with my co-host, just about like how I'm trying to think of how to word it. Obviously, you worded it very strongly, and I like the way that you worded it. I'm just trying to make sure I don't reiterate it in the same exact way. Just that, like you said, depending on what you want to go do, there's only so many things in careers that college is absolutely essential to prepare you for. Like my girlfriend right now, like she originally wanted to go to med school. Well, like if you want to go to med school, that track is very clear cut. You have to achieve A, B, C, D before you can do E.
Yeah.
You have to choose E, F, G before you can go to H. Like it's very clear cut. Business specifically does not work that way.
Right.
And there's a lot of other like different careers that don't work that way either. Like you said,
Mhm.
there's obviously very specialized careers like attorneys, lawyers, doctors, but then there's places like business that if you can kind of just get your foot in the door at 18, if some in some cases you might have a family member who owns a business, you might be able to get in a little bit sooner and
Mhm.
just kind of learn underneath that person, just shadow them and see how things work. That information is honestly, I can't necessarily put a number to it, but it's more valuable than what you're going to get from that classroom. Because what
100%.
I mean, not that I'm not saying my experience here hasn't been essential to where I am right now, because it has, but that's just my personal journey. And that, like, the people that I've been able to network with here, like, there's different things to take into effect, but at the same time, like, there's a lot of different things that you can compare
Yep.
there. And I guess what I was trying to say, I guess, is like, yeah, it's not 100% essential depending on the direction that you want to go.
Right.
And why go into all the debt? Why, like there's
Right.
a lot of different things that you can weigh. Cause I mean, you come out of high school and you start saving. If you still live at home and start getting a piece of these deals or something like that, and you save up and you make this money, you might be able to put a down payment on a house without ever necessarily having to go get student loans. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like there's different things that you can look at. And obviously everybody's journey is different. So I'm not trying to knock on anybody in school right now.
Right.
I'm just
Totally.
saying that there's different ways to approach things, and now more so than ever, you don't necessarily have to go the one clear cut route that everybody says you do or did.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, like for me, I can say for sure, and some other people that I know as well, like a lot of this comes from like our parents, like, they still work 40 plus hour weeks to put food on the table. They still, bust their backs to do a lot of different things with the way that things are going right now. And they've pushed us from literally birth to go to school because they want us to have it better than they had it, or whatever that thing is. And that just comes from, the generations above us who weren't exactly wealthy, not
Right.
that they didn't have a good life or anything like that, but they weren't exactly wealthy. They didn't have that freedom. So a lot of them don't know what this looks like. And that's something that I run into a lot because I'm a dreamer. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
like to think big. I have these
Yeah.
visions. I have a lot of different things I want to accomplish and do in my life. But it's really hard for some people to wrap their heads around that when they've never been exposed to that level of information or success or anything of the sort. And I run into that a lot. And it's very difficult sometimes to share with those people. And it's not that they don't care about what you want to do or what you want to accomplish or anything like that, but it's just that their minds have not been exposed to anything to that point. So it's not that it's impossible, but they just don't know that it's possible.
Yeah.
They were taught a way, but they weren't taught the way. And that's something that I've ran into numerous times. And I mean, it's still kind of fight with from a family standpoint, just because they don't know any
Yeah.
better. They're telling you what they taught, and they're telling you what they were taught, and they're trying to teach you what they know, but is what they know the best thing?
Yeah.
Not exactly. So,
That because that's been pushed very hard the last 40 years, right? That whole narrative of you got to go to college, you got to get that pigskin, right? That started like really in the 80s. Because I can remember like, my dad was in the trades, and and I know a lot of the people that were in the trades would push that on their kids because they're like, I don't want this for you. I don't want you having to go to some mud pit every day and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? There's something to be said about the trades. I mean, number one, if you graduate, I'm going to kind of go off on a tangent here, okay?
ready.
So if when you graduate high school at 18 years old, who the hell knows what you want to do at that age, right? So you're going to go and you're going to spend $100,000 on a degree that you might not even use. That I think that the statistic is something like 75% of the people that get a degree don't even use their degree. And so how do you even know what you want to do? Number one. Number two, why can't you get into a trade when you graduate high school? There is a lot of good trades out there, whether it's, you want to be an electrician, you want to be a plumber, you want to be an over the road trucker. You could graduate high school at 18 years old, get into an apprenticeship, and be making $50,000 a year on average at 18 years old. get benefits, get a health insurance. You're going to get a pension. You're going to get an annuity. You don't get that in college, right? So you spend 4 to 5 years in the trades as an apprentice. By the time your friends are graduating college, you're a journeyman now in that trade. So you're making top scale. So you could be making almost $100,000 a year in the trades. And your friends are $100,000 in debt in college, right? And they don't know what they want to do. And maybe you get into the trades and you don't know if that's what you really want to do. But hey, at least you're making money, where if you decide, well, maybe I want to do this, it's an easy switch, right? Or maybe you do want to go to college and you figure it out when you're in your later 20s. By all means, do it, right? But I even tell my son, we tell our son, we're like, because he's 16 and he's going to graduate in a couple of years, and we really don't push college on him. If he wants to go to college, that's fine, but we don't push it. We let him decide like what he wants to do. I mean, he's going to do something, right? He's not just going to sit at home and play video games. He's got to do something. But there's so much out there and there's so many ways to make money. It's hard to just tell a kid, hey, go do this, right? And that's really indoctrinated in the schools, right? When you're that junior or senior, you're like, you need to prep for college, you need to get yourself ready for college. And who knows what they really want to do, I mean, it's hell, I'm in my 40s and I don't know what I want to do for when I grow up.
No, and I think that's no, I really love what you just said. I mean, I feel like it's imposed upon us at such a young age that we just have to know what we want to do in the direction that we want to go. I mean, and yeah, it's advantageous if you do know that. But the number of kids that come to school and think that they're going to go into one thing and then they change their major within a semester is baffling, because you get in and then you realize oh my God, this is awful. I want nothing to do with this, whatever that thing may be. I came in and wanted to do accounting, not a fan anymore. I'm sorry, but it's not specifically that. Obviously, part of that is in business, but not I don't want to be that specialized into it. I mean, and coming up, there's I'm trying not to knock on the school system, but
No,
there's
right.
a lot of things that I mean, I just wish I kind of would have had a little bit sooner. And I can't necessarily say that, I'm only 21 years old, but just where I can see myself coming up through school, if I had more opportunity to try more real world things,
Mm-hmm.
I would have a complete different perspective right now. Where
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the natural soft skills that you build through school aren't useful. That's not exactly what I'm saying. I can tell you that I have yet to use calculus again, but I'm not going to go down that road.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is while I'm learning, English, science, and those things, building that well-rounded knowledge is useful. But at the same time, I didn't get to try any real world stuff. I still don't exactly know how to I still don't exactly know how to manage my finances. I still don't exactly know what I want to do. And that's okay. But it's because so many kids don't even get to try anything until they graduate college and they're already $100,000 in debt.
Mm-hmm.
And they still don't know what they want to do because they learned in theory that they would like that thing in a classroom. And they still I mean, yeah, some of us land internships, but at the same time, let's say for whatever reason you didn't get one, and then you graduate from school, however much money in debt, and then you try that thing and you don't even like it.
Yep.
And it's that to me is the ultimate
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really know what to call it, but it's
No, you nailed it. You nailed it on the head, because in fact, my son just recently brought that up. He was like, man, I wish they had options for us so that we can test drive, some of these various careers, whether it is trades or whether it is being an accountant or whatever. But yeah, you're right. They're too busy trying to teach calculus and the quadratic formula, which you'll never use in life. Right. A side note, I've been saying I think my retirement project is I want to create a new age school, right? I watched this Netflix documentary that it was a preschool and elementary school in the UK that was kind of, it wasn't your traditional school curriculum. You know, they had like a 30-minute session of meditation. They had, they were teaching the kids about money. They were teaching the kids about mindfulness. They were teaching the kids about, you know, how to handle escalated situations. Maybe it's with a bully or something like that. Like you said earlier, like real life experiences, like that should be what should be taught in school, right? Teach kids how to cope, especially now with social media, when, you know, they just released this this study that said, like, it showed a chart, a bar chart or a line chart, sorry, and it showed the age groups over the course since the last 30 years, and their the cases of depression, on how it's just like, it's kind of remained flat up until the early 2000s. And then when smartphones and social media came out, you just saw that line graph just do this, right? Because kids are so depressed now, especially with COVID. They were locked up for almost 2 years. They're constantly comparing themselves to their peers, or the life that the peer is living, or that someone that they don't even know is living on Instagram, that is mostly false anyways. I'm going off on a rant. But, yeah, you nailed it on the head. It's like there should be that opportunity for kids to experience those different careers or lifestyles, so they can decide for themselves what suits them best, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I mean, I could go on for a long time about social media, but I won't. I feel like one of the things that I've dealt with the most in that regard is like absolutely like comparison, like you've said. I mean, it's got to a point that networks and things have got to decide what we believe successful looks like.
Yeah.
And especially on social media, it's, you know, we see people driving around in Lambos with a bunch of girls, with whatever it is. I'm obviously that works the other way too. We see movie stars, we see pop stars, we see all these things. And it's exactly that. It's things. And that's what we think we need. And like, don't get me wrong. Yeah, some of those things are cool. There's some of the things that I want as well. But that's not necessarily what success actually looks like. And because we see that so much, that's what we think it is, but we don't realize that success is subjective. Like, like you could live in a 2-bedroom house in the middle of nowhere with you and a significant other and one kid, and that could be your definition of success.
Yeah.
And I mean, in like, you know, maybe you don't have mounds and mounds of cash. Maybe you don't have the nicest car on the block. You know, maybe you still have to repair that leak in the roof. I don't know what it is, but maybe that's what success looks like to you.
Hmm.
And that's something that I've been trying to push lately, just that like, don't let somebody else's definition define what you want or need. And and I know it's extremely hard because like it's just something that like the age that we've grown up, it's just natural. It's always been there where we don't really know any better. Like this social media wasn't really a new thing for us because it's kind of just always been around.
Yeah.
So like it's just like it was just immediately ingrained at that point that that's what it looks like. That's where we need to be happy because they look so happy because they blah blah blah, you know,
Yeah.
whatever that thing is. And it's just like, you know, it's too many of us now like form what we want to do, any of those things because either somebody else told us to or because somebody else said so or whatever it is. And none of us actually know who we are.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, like we were just talking about, like those opportunities to truly try something. And at a young age, it's really, really difficult because you just don't know.
Hmm.
You don't know what you don't know. But that's
Right.
what I mean, like in getting to try things, because now you can say, like, you know, I genuinely like this thing. I genuinely don't like that thing, you know, whatever that is. But you get to decide it for yourself. Where like now there's so many kids that I mean, you grow up doing either what your parents say or what somebody else says. And now you got these societal pressures as well from social media and this and that because you want to be as successful as possible so you can have that car and still live paycheck to paycheck. And I don't know. I mean, personally, that's not me. And
Yeah.
I'm doing my best to get away from that as well, but it's still something that is being imposed just because every time I get on Instagram, it's the same stuff. I mean, and like, yeah, your feed morphs a little bit to the things that you like and the things that you interact with, but for the most part, you're going to see what they want you to see. And
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, do you feel like your generation is a little bit more, the, I feel like your generation is a little bit more, they're more interested in experience than actually, collecting that 9 to 5 paycheck. And what I mean by that is, I see a lot of younger people, like especially in their 20s, they travel much more than my generation did. They go off and they have these experiences, like I'll kind of use an example like Coachella, right? That's an experience, right? That wasn't really around when I was in my 20s. And now kids are all about, I want to go do these things rather than have these, not, I wouldn't say have these things, because I think you're right. I think that a lot of the youth there's a good percentage that's tied to those material things. But I think there's a huge chunk that, they just want to go off. If they want to go off and go to, Greece for a month or whatever, they can. And really they can with social media. If you have a big following and you have, you generate revenue off of your following, I mean, you could work from anywhere. I mean, you're even seeing that now during COVID, right? You had all those people from the major cities that ended up going and getting Airbnbs because they were working from home, and they were coming out of New York and Chicago and LA, and they were getting Airbnbs in the Carolinas and Austin, Texas, or Colorado, and just working there because they'd rather be in that environment, right, than be stuck in their home where they couldn't do anything. And I feel like the younger, like your generation is kind of that way too. You're almost seeing that now with the workforce. It's really hard to get good help because so many kids are like, well, why would I want to go and make $15 an hour or $10 an hour when I can go down and get an Airbnb in Austin, Texas for a month and, with my friends and hang out and, make YouTube videos or whatever, I don't know. I mean, it's a completely different way of life now. The last 10 years it's shifted 180 degrees.
yeah, absolutely. I think that personally, I think social media has a lot to do with that and a lot of the societal things we were just talking about, because they've created this image that we all think is cool and that we all desire, to the point that now you can generate revenue off of your social media or YouTube or whatever following and stuff, because you're outgoing and having these experiences that everyone else wants to have. So when you have everyone else tuning into your stuff, paying attention, you're bringing attention to this platform. So then this platform can then put ads, they can then put whatever they want on this, because you've brought all this attention here, which is what they want as a platform.
Mm-hmm.
So now at this point, we can say, we have all these people here, you pay us to bring you the people, and you can do whatever you want with it at that point. But what I mean now is that, like, when you're getting to go have these experiences traveling, whatever it is, driving these cars, whatever it is, and like you share that through YouTube, so Instagram, whatever, and these all people like that because they don't have that, because they
Yeah.
want that thing, they desire that level of success, whatever you want to call it, that you are now depicting in that video. So you bring that attention, and it's just kind of that like weird conundrum that goes on with that. But I feel like I can also relate some of that to, like, I don't hear it as much anymore, but I remember growing up, there was a big like saying, YOLO, that would just go around.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
feel like that has taken a pretty large, like, I'm trying to think of like the right word, but it's had a large effect on a lot of us young people, because now we say, oh, well, what if we die tomorrow? What if we
Yeah.
don't make it another year? What if we do this? And don't get me wrong, like, we don't know what's going to happen. You obviously can't predict if you're going to get in a car accident or something like that. Like, you can't predict those things.
Right.
But, and I'm not saying that you should just be complacent and not go do anything, but like, we're all now in such a hurry to do these things because we want to experience them while we're young. And I can even say, in like my specific position, like, yeah, like I want to travel and things as well. I want to go, to some really cool places. I want to meet really cool people, like I want to have some of those things. But like to me, like it's not overly important, but like I want to be able to enjoy them while I'm in like a state that I can enjoy them to their fullest extent. To the point that like if I want to go, I mean, I don't know if I ever would, but if I decided I wanted to go skydiving or
Yeah.
bungee jumping or something like that, like I can do that and not necessarily like pay for 6 months afterwards, where like I'm not saying that. And it's hard for us young people to even recognize that. Like I see videos all the time, like I'm a big Gary Vee follower, that he talks about, like I see videos of him talking to young people all the time. And he says, a lot of just slow down and enjoy the journey. And what he'll tell them is he's like, dude, like if you had any idea how young I feel in my 40s right now, and you would slow down. But like we can't comprehend that because we're in our teens, we're in our 20s. Like we know how we feel right now, and all we know is that like we hear from our parents, or like like you mentioned earlier, like some parents that are in trades, like that takes a toll on your body. And we see our grandparents that might have Alzheimer's, we see our grandparents that might have these things, and we all now want to experience these things now while we're in our like best state to enjoy and remember that thing. And I feel like that is where a lot of this comes from. Now, I cannot claim to be any sort of expert on any of that stuff. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
There's the disclaimer.
Mm.
Anyway, I do know it's about time to start winding it down here. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know we're already at our hour that we had blocked out. But one of the questions I always like to ask the guests, just in closing, is if you could go back in time and have a conversation with yourself during that ground zero moment, or just one of those moments where you had to shift focus and change gears, what do you think you would tell yourself in that conversation?
I often think about this. I think I would go back to my 19-year-old self, kind of like what I was talking about, that kid earlier. And basically just do the advice that I had told that kid, is find the mentor. If this is what because really, like real estate, I wanted to do real estate since I was in my teens, because my uncle used to own real estate. My dad explained to me how real estate works. And so it really piqued my interest. And when I graduated high school, I didn't even want to go to college. I wanted to immediately like go and buy a fourplex and, so on and so forth. But my parents made me go to college, which to this day doesn't make any sense to me because I was a horrendous high school student. Like I barely graduated high school, But yeah, I would go back to that 19-year-old self and tell me, hey, hook up with a landlord or a property owner and work with that person and learn the business and figure out how you can get into deals. Cause that's more than half the battle,
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part of that we can gear towards any younger viewers tuning into this right now. I had a conversation with a guy a few weeks ago as well, that he more or less said, like, for those of you out there who don't know what you want to do and you're not happy in what you're doing, find that thing that you used to enjoy when you were a little boy or a little girl and do more of that.
Yes.
And I'll leave it at that. But
Yeah.
Bo, I just want to thank you so much for being willing to come on today. I think we had a lot of really great in-depth conversations on some different things today that might be a little bit controversial, but hey, it was a good time. And I think there's a lot of value in there as well. So just thank you again for being willing to come onto the show and share your perspective, your ideas, your experiences. Before we go, could we just get the best place for anyone listening to potentially follow up and get in touch with you?
Probably LinkedIn or Instagram is probably the best place. I think you've got my my links, right? You're going to put those links up?
Yeah, I'll throw them in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's probably the best place, is LinkedIn or Instagram. Shoot me a DM, and yeah, I really appreciate you bringing me on. This was fun. I mean, I could go on for another 2 hours.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some of these things I could go on for a long time, but
Yeah.
I try not to take up too much of your time as well as anybody tuned in right now. So again, I just want to say thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. With that, everyone, always remember, this is Dream Chasers Ground Zero, and there's nowhere to go from here. But thanks, guys.